And I pick up here because there is, for people to understand, I'm sure you've got some Christians that listen and some Bible readers. The ancient Philistines, David fighting the Philistine giant Goliath and whatnot. The ancient Philistines, after the Babylonian captivity in 586 BC, ceased to exist. You hear about a whisper of them in the days of Nehemiah. Moab, Edom, Ammon, as nation states. If I say their names, most people are like, what are those? Exactly. So as nation states, they ceased to exist. And so 500 years later, the Roman Empire comes into the Middle East. And anybody who's a Bible reader, and as I said, that's in the Quran as well, when you open up your Bible and you start reading in the Gospel of Matthew, the land is called the land of Israel by the Apostle Matthew. The angel tells Joseph to take Mary and Jesus and to go up to the land of Israel. So your Bible calls it Israel. You want to cross your Bible, go ahead, but I'm not going to cross my Bible. Not only so, but the province in the Gospels is called the province of Judea. Why did the Romans call it Judea? Because there were Jews there, not Arabs. Where does this term Palestine come from? What happens is in slide number 9, if we go to slide number 9, there was actually, everybody knows about the revolt that the Jews began in 70 AD when the temple was destroyed. But there was a second revolt, Laura, in the 2nd century under during the reign of the Emperor Hadrian. And he was so incensed with the Jews revolting a second time that what he decided to do is he basically banned the Jews from coming into Jerusalem. And then he built a heathen temple on top of the destroyed temple. And then he changed the name of the province from Judea. And he reached back 700 years in time, back to the Babylonian captivity, pulled out the ancient Philistines, whom he knew were the historical enemies of Israel in their holy book. And he called the land Palestina instead of Judea to spite the Jews, and changed the name of Jerusalem to Aelina Capitolina. So to put it in modern terms that the hearers can better understand, that's almost like the French coming in and taking over Ottawa and then calling it Paris, just to spite the English. That's what he did. So this is where the term Palestine comes back in history 700 years after the extinction of the Philistine people. Now, if we keep going with the slides one by one, I'll go through them quickly, but this is the kind of homework that needs to be done if you want to understand that issue. Exactly. If you have an opinion about Gaza, I ask people, if you're going to have a political opinion about Gaza and West Bank, my question is, do you know how Gaza and West Bank were created? And almost nobody knows, but they have an opinion about it. So now you got the Byzantines, the Byzantine Empire, Eastern Roman Empire, they call it Palestina. And then if we keep going, what happens after the Byzantines, slide number 11. Let's go to slide number 12. Let's go to slide number 12. So it's in that context here. It's in that context. There's your Muslim empire. And there's the Arabian Peninsula that I was talking about earlier. That's in the lower right corner of your screen. Modern-day Saudi Arabia. The Rashidun Caliphate, that's the Muslim empire. There were 3 power blocks in the region, the Byzantine Empire to the west, the Sasanian Empire to the east. Those guys in green, after uniting the peninsula, are going to go out and take over the Byzantine Empire completely. And when they do, they're going to, in the next slide, everything now here that you see, the Middle East has become Muslim and Arabic by force of sword and by conquest. Jerusalem is utterly irrelevant in Islamic theology. I'm not going to go into the details now. We can talk about Jerusalem another time. But they come over there and they take over the area. Now, when they get to the Mediterranean Sea, they come across a land that's called Palestina. Why? Because we saw that the Romans reached back 700 years in time and gave it the name of the enemies of the Jews just to spite the Jews. So what is the Arab going to call it? He just transliterates Palestina into Palestine, which is why Arabs say Palestine. By the way, the word Palestine is a Hebrew word, Peleshet. So it's ironic that you have so-called Arabic Palestinians claiming freedom for Palestine when they don't even have an Arabic word for their own land because it was never their land. They're using a Hebrew word to describe the land they're claiming as theirs. I mean, more ironic than that, you die. I don't know what could be more ironic than that.
That is amazing. And that is something I haven't heard because I've been having a lot of guests on to talk about this. I appreciate that. Wow.
Well, to put it in context, when Muslims in Jerusalem pray, they are instructed. At first, Muhammad instructed them to face Jerusalem, but then he instructs them to face Mecca. So just you talk about optics, just find a picture on the internet of the Muslims. They say, look, Jerusalem is the third holiest site in Islam. This is ours. The Jews came and took it from us, and we are reclaiming our national birthright. When the Muslims pray in Jerusalem, they turn their backs to Jerusalem and they face Mecca eastward. Their rumps, their behinds are given to Jerusalem. They literally give their behinds to Jerusalem. They must turn their back to Jerusalem so they can worship their God. How is Jerusalem any holy in Islam when you have to turn your back to it?
Right. Wow.
Okay, so briefly, this is slide number 16. The Crusader kingdom comes in. Slide number 16. And how much do we hear about the evil? Oh, I added a slide in the meantime. Look in the, if you go back, let's see, is it maybe 15? Yeah, there we go. Good job. Thank you, guys. Excellent work there. Now, let me say something about the Crusades that a lot of people don't consider. Muslims will say, you guys coming in here, the Jews coming in here, and America coming in here, those are crusades, and you want to colonize us like you did, like the British Empire colonized us, and you want to take our land that is not ours. I repeat, that wasn't their land. Islam took that land from the West. The Roman Empire, and before it, the Grecian Empire under Alexander the Great, the West has possessed that land since 330 BC. From 330 BC to about 700, so for 1,000 years, those lands are Western lands, and that's why people would go from Europe to worship in Jerusalem. So the Arabs come out and they take that land after the West having possessed it for 1,000 years. So what does Europe do naturally? They send crusades. Now, I am painfully aware of the excesses of the Roman Catholic Church that denies the Bible and does not teach the true gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, which instructs us that we are saved without works, without sacraments, without the intercession of Mary. We are saved only and exclusively by faith in the Lord Jesus Christ alone, to whom be all the glory. I'm aware of that. But the Roman Catholic Church or the West wasn't wrong about everything. And as far as the casus belli, the cause of war, as far as geopolitically speaking, the West was absolutely justified in sending the Crusades. They are reclaiming land that they had possessed for 1,000 years, and a bunch of Arabs come out of the desert and in the name of Allah take over. What would you expect the West to do? To put it in modern terms, it's the equivalent of, it's as if America and Canada today conquer the Middle East. If we conquered the Middle East today, would we not expect the Arabs to counterattack and reclaim it? Sure, we would. So that's what the Romans did. The Arabs came out of the Arabian Peninsula and took over their land. Jerusalem is holy to Christianity and to Judaism, not to Islam. So the Crusades were entirely justified.
It was just another big fight, I guess, over the land.
Land, yeah. But that land belonged to Europe for 1,000 years before it belonged to Islam. For 1,000 years. All right. So if we go now, so what happens next after that? After that, quickly, the Mamluks take over, which is a Turkish. Those are the servants of the Arabs. They're a Turkish tribe, and they rebel against their masters, and then they take over their masters' lands. And they basically use the term. They call it Philistine, and then after that, everybody knows the Ottoman Empire. The Turkish Ottoman Empire takes over. There's turning after turning of empires. That's slide number 17, if I'm not mistaken. Now, here's the interesting thing. The Ottomans don't call it Palestine. The Ottomans call it Syria. Keep that in mind, because that's going to be key to what the Nakba is. Many of the hearers, maybe your audience may have heard of the term of Nakba. And many people think that Nakba means it's the catastrophe of the creation of the state of Israel. Technically, that is not so. The Nakba, actually, the Arabs of the turn of the 20th century considered the catastrophe to be the creation of Palestine. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive to people and cognitively dissonant, but you're going to have to rewire your brain if you want to understand real history. The Arabs revolted against the idea of Palestine because they believed that the creation of Palestine was a Zionist conspiracy. Get that? I'll explain how in a couple of minutes. All right, so the next thing after that, I'm going to show people here on the map. Here's the Ottoman, the provinces, how they were divided. And you can see that they call it Syria. It's southern Syria, not Palestine. At the bottom of your screen, you see Jerusalem, the Sanjak of Jerusalem. That is called Syria. That's known as southern Syria. They do not call it Palestine. And if you go to slide number 21, after World War I, the British, of course, defeat the Ottoman Empire. They take over it. And here's a picture of General Allenby, who walked on foot into Jerusalem. You know why he walked on foot, by the way? Because he believes that Jesus Christ is going to come back on horseback into the city. And he considered himself unworthy to walk into Jerusalem on horseback. So he dismounted and walked on foot.
Wow.
And there's the Balfour Declaration. Yeah, pretty neat. There's the Balfour Declaration, which reads... now, that was addressed to the Lord Rothschild, and I know this is the point where everybody goes, oh, evil conspiracists, evil Jews. I knew it. The state of Israel is an evil entity. Boy, there's a lot of nuance to bring to that kind of thinking, but we can leave that for later. So now I want to point to the wording of the Balfour Declaration. That's important too. Dear Lord Rothschild, Balfour says, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. Quote, His Majesty's government view with favor, now watch this, the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Why do they use Palestine? I've heard people on the media, supposed experts in history and experts in conspiracies, come up and say, see, the British called it Palestine. That means it belongs to the Arabic people. Even the British knew that. You don't understand what's going on historically. They use the term Palestine because that's the term that justified them in allowing Jews to come back. Palestine at that point was a relatively neutral term. If they wanted to side with the Arabs, they would have called it, they would have said, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Syria of a national home for the Jewish people. That's why they switched over to Palestine, because Palestine is a neutral term. The Arabs didn't care about something called Palestine. And so the revolt of the Arabs against the British, if you go down to slide number 24, was, how dare you call it Palestine? That's history. And if I'm saying something wrong, fact check me. There's the picture of the book that I told you about, George Antonios. I think it was written in 1938, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
The Arab Awakening by George Antonios.
Right. This is your family, your grandfather, or
it's no. So as far as George Antonios, I cannot prove a blood link, but he's from my hometown. He bears my name, which is very small, and he's got a similar Orthodox background and went down to Palestine. So I mean, the odds are
okay. So you don't know
the odds
for sure.
are no, I don't know for sure.
The odds are that you might be related to him.
Sure, absolutely.
Wow.
So تنبهوا واستيقظوا أيها العرب. The title is, wake up, O Arabs. Basically, I'm shortening it.
Okay.
Now, you know what he says in there?
What?
He basically says, this is not Palestine. Stop calling it Palestine. This is Syria. You're only calling it Palestine because you want the Balfour Declaration to have a foot to stand on so you can allow the Jews to return. Because the Ottomans, remember, had been calling it Syria for 400 years. That's all the Arabs knew. The Arabs of the day. They hated the term Palestine. That's why Golda Meir, the prime minister of Israel during the Yom Kippur War, in her famous interview, she says, look, I have a Palestinian passport. She shows her Palestinian passport. So what I'm asking the audience to understand is this. The way the Arab the connotation of the word Israel today, with what the kind of feelings and emotions that the word Israel evokes in Arabs today, was exactly the kind of feeling and emotions that the word Palestine evoked in the Arabs at the turn of the 20th century. And so what has happened was a big switch in the terms, and it happened precisely to pull the wool over your eyes in the West. So this is slide number 25.
Fascinating.
And again, do me a favor and fact check me on this stuff, guys. This is slide number 25. This stuff you're not going to get on the CBC and
no,
whatever
this is
else.
gold.
That's why you. That's why you're watching
Share,
Laura-Lynn.
everybody. Everybody share, share, share. You want to know the truth? This is amazing.
So now we're coming up to your question. 1919, the first Congress of Muslim Christian Associations met in Jerusalem to elect local representatives for the International Peace Conference in Paris. During the meeting, the following resolution was adopted by local Arab leaders, and I quote, "We consider Palestine as part of Arab Syria. As it has never been separated from it at any time, we are connected with it by national, religious, linguistic, natural, economic, and geographic bonds." So they're telling the world, this is Syria, basically. You want to talk Palestine? Okay, but that's Syria. 1937, the local Arab leader Aouni bin Abu al-Hadi addressed the British Peel Commission, which suggested a partition of the British Palestine Mandate. Quote, "There is no such country as Palestine. Palestine, listen to this." 1937, the local Arab leader says, "Palestine is a term that the Zionists invented. There is no Palestine in the Bible. Our country was for centuries part of Syria." 1946, Arab-American Princeton professor Philippe Hette, famous guy, testified against partition to the Anglo-American Committee with the following candid statement: "There is no such thing in Palestine in history, absolutely not." So the Arabs were saying then what the Jews are saying today.
That's
Why are they saying
amazing.
that? Because for them, Palestine was the Zionist conspiracy, because the Balfour Declaration used the term Palestine. So they wanted to say Syria, which would block Jewish immigration to the region. Now, you want to the next slide is shocking, because the two-state solution, everybody's talking about the two-state solution. I feel like, Laura, I feel like I'm in a twilight zone when I hear people still discussing the two-state solution. We've already had the two-state solution. It was implemented 101 years ago. 101 years ago, we established the two-state solution, illegally, actually. You know what the two-state solution is? Israel and Jordan. Jordan is the Palestinian, in modern understanding, state. So if you look at your map there on the right, everything in white was the mandate for Palestine. The Balfour Declaration allowed Jewish presence and immigration to that area in white. Therefore, west of Jordan and east of Jordan, the Jews could have come and established for themselves a home west and east of the Jordan River. But what had happened was, long story short, I'm going to cut it short, but there was the Arab tribe that was in charge of Mecca got booted out by the Saudi tribe. So they had helped the British during World War I, and as a compensation prize, Winston Churchill, one Sunday afternoon over tea in Cairo, literally, that's what he boasts of, he, with a stroke of a pen, he basically takes the pen, cuts everything east of Jordan, 77% of the territory wherein Jews could have lived, and he said, "All right, we'll give you this. We'll give to an Arab who came out of Arabia." And they call it, Laura, they didn't even have a name for the country. That's why they called it Transjordan, which is simply a geographic description. It's like, what do we call this place? I don't know. It's on the east side of the Jordan River. Oh, okay, so it's Transjordan. And so for the next 20 years, it's known as Transjordan. And that was a botch on the Jordanian state. So they were ashamed of that. And they petitioned the United States and saying, just call us Jordan, because it's silly to call us Transjordan, which is why today you have the country of Jordan, which is named after a river. So that's a two-state solution. It was officialized at the 1921 Cairo conference. And the Arabs got the lion's share of the territory. They got 77% of the territory. That's why in the next slide I showed what each bought. It was a Palestinian Arab terrorist who believed in Jesus Christ and got saved, became a Christian. He says one day, I was a Jordanian all my life. And then one day I woke up and someone took the star off my flag and now I was a Palestinian. Look at the two flags. The top one is the flag of Jordan. The bottom one is the flag of Palestine that you see, Lord help me. When I see those university students, Canadian Japhethite, white, blue-eyed, university-educated, media-gobbling students walk out on the streets and waving Palestinian flags and screaming, "Wave Palestine." And it's like those guys don't know the 101 geography, that's a Jordanian flag that you're flying. And you are thereby implicitly confessing that Jordan is the Palestinian state.
Wow.
Jordan is the Palestinian state. They got the lion's share.
And why?
Right, how are we doing so far?
I'm great. I don't even want to stop you. It's so fascinating. But so why wouldn't the Palestinians then be more at home in Jordan and just because it's such a big area?
Well, they would be, but well, look, you know how it is with kids. Nobody wants the toy until someone picks it up, and especially if the kid that picks up the toy can make it work. Right? That's a broken toy. Nobody wants it. Then a kid comes along, and makes the toy work, and all of a sudden it's, hey, that's my toy. That's just all it is. And the proof is, as I told you, they're going against the Quran by saying that, their own Quran. That's why.
So what you mean is that Israel works.
Yep, they came to the land. You know what? Perfect segue here. Let me show you a couple of things that's gonna answer now your question here too.
Yep.
So slide number 30. I'm really glad that you're allowing me the opportunity to do this, Laura, to put this stuff out there.
Thank you. We need this.
All right, now it's an amazing thing. It's a testimony to how true the Bible is. You see, the Lord, Israel rejected their God in the Old Testament, and they rejected Jesus Christ and didn't even believe he's a real Jew, called him a Samaritan. And Moses prophesied. He said, I will move you to jealousy with those that are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. That's the verse on top of the screen. He said, God, there's a prophecy of Moses 1,500 years before Christ, who says, I'm going to move the Israelites to jealousy with those which are not a people. And boy, that's the Palestinians, because there's no such thing as an ethnic Palestinian identity. It's a purely political, fabricated identity. And I'm not saying this. The Arabs are saying this. This is the PLO leader. If some of you are old enough to remember Yasser Arafat and the PLO movement, the Palestinians that hid in Lebanon were attacking Israel out of Lebanon. And we Christians had to fight against them. 1977, the leader Zohair Mohsen on the left side. This is what the PLO leader says. The Palestinian people does not exist. In reality today, there is no difference between Jordanians, Palestinians, Syrians, and Lebanese. Only for political and tactical reasons do we speak today about the existence of a Palestinian people, since Arab national interests demand that we posit the existence of a distinct, quote, Palestinian people to oppose Zionism. For tactical reasons, Jordan cannot raise claims to Haifa and Jaffa, which are in Israel proper, while as a Palestinian, see, Jordan can't claim that land. That looks bad. But me as an Arab inside that land, because I identify as non-Jordanian, so then I can say this is my land, because if they identified as Jordanian, Laura, then the world would tell them, well, then go to Jordan. But then they say, well, no, I'm not Jordanian, even though I have the same flag, by the way. But I'm not Jordanian. I'm a Palestinian. So I want this land. That's why. That's it. And this is, you've got this stuff. Robert Spencer, December 9th, 2011. Quote, the Palestinian nation was invented as a tool of the jihad against Israel. Instead of tiny Israel surrounded by huge and hostile Arab states, the picture suddenly changed to the powerful Israeli war machine victimizing an even tinier people, which is what I was telling you in the beginning. Now, as far as why they didn't want it, slide 33, here's why they didn't want it, Laura. There was nothing there. It was a barren land. And anybody who's a Bible reader knows that that was the judgment of God because of the Jews' rebellion. And notice I'm saying the Jews' rebellion. I'm not a guy who's whitewashing Israel, who's blind to the sins of Israel. Believe me, our church is in a religious Jewish setting, and I love the Jewish people, and I love the Arabic people, and I love all peoples because my God loves all peoples. I'm not blind, but I'm not blind to their sin. So this is why I say they rebelled. They did. And part of what they're suffering is judgment of God. Absolutely. But the reason why the Arabs didn't want it, nobody was interested, because there was nothing there. An English pilgrim in 1590, who was there, says there's nothing there in relation to Jerusalem to be seen but a little of the old walls which is yet remaining, and all the rest is grass, moss, and weeds. The British Council in 1857 describes the country as considerable degree empty of inhabitants, and therefore its greatest need is of a body of population. In 1857, a few years before Theodor Herzl begins the modern Zionist movement to repopulate the land, a land that nobody cared about. And Mark Twain, everybody knows Mark Twain, and he had a way with the words, and here's how he describes it. He says, there is not a solitary village throughout its whole extent, that's in northern Israel, not for 30 miles in either direction. One may ride 10 miles hereabouts and not see 10 human beings. Where's the Arab population? For the sort of solitude To make one dreary, come to Galilee. Nazareth is forlorn, Jericho lies a moldering ruin, Bethlehem and Bethany in their poverty and humiliation, untenanted by any living creature. A desolate country whose soil is rich enough, but is given over wholly to weeds. A silent, mournful expanse, a desolation. We never saw a human being on the whole route, hardly a tree or shrub anywhere. Even the olive tree and the cactus, those fast friends of a worthless soil, had almost deserted the country. Palestine sits in sackcloth and ashes, desolate and unlovely. Mark Twain, 1867. Where
Wow.
is the Arab population?
Ah,
People they talked to me about genocide in Gaza. The population of Gaza tripled, I think, in the last decade. Tripled. You know who's being genocided? Christians in the Middle East. This is why they didn't want it, because there was nothing there. Now, what happened was when the Jews came in, Laura, the land revived. Like it or not, the reason why people hate the Jews so much, the Gentiles, is because they envy them. They envy the Jews' ability to turn a rock into gold, to turn a thread into a must-have Christmas toy, to turn a swampland into prime real estate. That's why, and that's what they did. I mean, look, that's what they do wherever they go. So they go there, and I'm not blind to their sins, but you got to admit they've got a knack for creating wealth, which is a promise of God. That's one of the proofs that they are the real Jews. By the way, we can get into that another time. Boy, I could tell you some stuff about that. Those are definitely the Jews in Israel are definitely the Bible Jews. And so they envied them because all of a sudden the land was prospering. You know what? The Jewish flux of repatriated Jews after World War I, World War II stirred up, it catalyzed the economy in the region. And now all of a sudden, a lot of Arabs realize, whoa, there's money to be made there. And all of a sudden, a whole bunch of Arabs started streaming down to that land. So the Jewish repatriation brought about an increase in Arab population in the area. The Jews coming in brought in more Arabs, not drove out Arabs. Now, I'm not saying they're nice. I'm not saying those Jews were nice, lovely people who were just, oh, come and help us and let's share the land. I'm not saying they're like that. I'm just saying for sheerly expedient economic reasons, as you know, whenever there's an economic boom, people follow the economic boom. And so they're coming into the land, repopulated the land with Arabs. But you don't hear any talk about that. So this is Winston Churchill, 1939, in the middle of the slide there. Noted, quote, so far from being persecuted, the Arabs have crowded into the country and multiplied. Winston Churchill is commenting on that. The guy who took 77% of the territory and gave it to a bunch of Arabs.
Isn't that interesting? Wow. And
number 35.
After being in Israel a couple of times in this last decade, I mean, it's just a beautiful, stunning place with industry and agriculture and the best hummus in the entire world, right, JT? We've never had hummus again like we had in Jerusalem and in the places around there. And it's absolutely, I have to say, beautiful.
You gotta taste my mom's hummus, Laura.
Okay. I'd love to.
That's something we fight with the Israelis over, who invented tabbouleh and falafel.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, so definitely, as you described it, it's the place flourished. The desert flourished and has blossomed. It's incredible what's happened down there, and the powerhouse of an economy. Now, this is what your question. These are the offers that were made to the Arabs, even after, I want to remind people, even after everything east of Jordan was taken away from a possible homeland from the Jews and given to the Arabs. So the Arabs have, what you're seeing here, at this point, when this is offered in 1937, that's the Peel Commission partition plan, the Arabs had already taken 77% of the territory, and still the Jews were offered an even smaller territory on the coast from Tel Aviv up through the north, about 1/5 of the remaining mandate territory. The Arabs would have had 4/5. The Arabs rejected it. They don't want a two-state solution. Then the next one, in 1947, there was another proposed partition plan. It was 2 states within Jewish Palestine. And that was rejected. Then there was, let's see. Then the civil war happened. Now, this is what I want to show people. Here's Gaza. Let me explain how Gaza and the West Bank came to be. When people are saying free Gaza, it's an open air prison. The Palestinians are surrounded there. They're oppressed by Israel. They're cutting off their electricity, but they only cut off the water after the October 7th attack. All right. You see this here? If we can blow up that map, this is the next one. If we can go to the next one. And the next after that, number 40. Yeah. All right. This is kind of a battle map of the Israeli War of Independence. At the cessation of hostilities in 1948, the Arab armies were controlling part. If you have the body of water that's blue vertically running across the map on the right side of the map. Left of it would be the area that the Arab armies were controlling, and that is the West Bank. That's what we call the West Bank. Down at the lower left corner of your screen, towards Egypt, is the area that the Egyptian armies were controlling. That is Gaza. And so if we go to the next slide, if you look at the 1949-1967 map, so the third one from the left, the third one, which has Israeli land in white and Palestinian land in green. This is what people are shown, that Israel is big, and those people here in the green, especially on the lower left, Gaza, which is northeast of Egypt, though this is the open air prison. This is the area that the armies controlled at the cessation of hostilities. That's what that is. That's it. Those people there in green should have gone back to Egypt. And those people, the people in green on the lower left of the map should have gone back to Egypt, and the people in green on the right side of the map should have gone back to Jordan. Now, granted, some Arabs actually are from the west of Jordan. That's granted. But I'm talking generally speaking. So what you see here, if that green, if you browse the net, they'll show you those maps. That's propaganda. They'll show you how it was all Palestine and Greek, and there was only some white pockets of Jews. And then the evil 1947 UN plan gave more white to the Jews and less green to the Muslims. And then after the war, Israel took even more white, and then there was less green. And now in 2008, look at how small the green is, when in reality, the real map is the one to the right. Starting from the middle one, 1920, the Jewish homeland was to involve east and west of Jordan, and that was taken from them and given to the Arabs. And then even what's remaining of the mandate west of Jordan is being cut up and given to the Arabs also. Let me tell you something according to Islamic theology. They don't want a two-state solution. That is simply a stepping stone and negotiation tactic to placate the Western powers on the way to the utter annihilation of the Jewish race. Because in Muslim theology, Judgment Day cannot come as long as there's a surviving Jew. The Hamas covenant, I have a video on Counsel and Might, my YouTube channel, where I read through the Hamas covenant, and they say that. They say, we must exterminate all the Jews for Judgment Day to come. It's the Arabs, the Muslims, I should say, the religious ones, they cannot abide by a two-state solution. They would be seen as traitors to their own kind. They believe that the Jews are essentially the seed of Satan and responsible for all the evil in the world and must be annihilated. That's why they have no problem killing children and women. They are playing you. You are being played in the West. You are being played because you cannot, because the West, Laura, has been so blessed because of the influence of the gospel. We've forgotten how brutal human nature can be and how evil religions can be. We have forgotten. We really have. We've had it good for a few hundred years because of the Christian setting that we've had in the West here. That's why it's hard for the Westerner to process exactly how brutal those people are. And let me say this. Let me say, and I'll leave it to you, and you can take the conversation wherever you want after this, Laura. But all this talk about this is propaganda, it's lies, it's not true. Israel did this to itself. The Holocaust was greatly exaggerated or never happened. All right, fine. Let me grant it. Let's grant that. Let me agree with you for argument's sake. The same people who go down on the street and say the Holocaust is a hoax and October 7th was a red flag operation, by the same mouth, turn around and call for a Holocaust. The Holocaust deniers in one breath say there was never a Holocaust, and the next say, gas the Jews. So whether there was a Holocaust or not, you are witnessing to a desire for a Holocaust, and you are working for a Holocaust, and you are asking for a genocide while denying that there was a genocide.